The Exorcist? It starts with a sound in the attic. Scratching, thumping, nothing unusual at first. Just a single mother in Georgetown, raising her daughter, trying to ignore the noises in the walls. But something has already entered their home, and it's not a rat. The Exorcist isn't a monster story. It's a slow possession, the unraveling of faith, science, and sanity. Regan, a bright 12-year-old girl, begins to change. Her voice deepens, her body twists, words appear carved into her skin. The doctors run tests, the priests whisper prayers, and every explanation collapses until only one remains. Something evil has taken hold. Blatty's genius wasn't in shock value, it was in realism. The terror feels domestic, ordinary. A bedroom becomes a battlefield between heaven and hell. The mother, Chris McNeil, isn't a believer. The priest, Father Karras, is losing his faith. The demon doesn't just torment them, it taunts their doubts. Because The Exorcist isn't about possession, it's about belief. What happens when the modern world runs out of answers, and all that's left is the unexplainable staring back? The exorcism itself isn't a triumph, it's agony. Latin prayers against ancient evil, furniture flying, bones breaking, the smell of decay, and in the middle of it all, a priest's desperate plea to prove that God still matters. Karras doesn't defeat the demon, he bargains with it, offers himself. Evil leaves the girl, and takes him instead. The room is quiet again, but nothing feels safe, not faith, reason, or love. Because Blatty's true horror isn't the supernatural. It's the idea that evil doesn't live in darkness. It hides in innocence, in children, in doubt, in the silence after prayer. The Exorcist is more than a ghost story. It's a philosophical war disguised as horror, a mirror held up to belief, daring you to stare into it long enough to see what looks back. The Monster of Florence. It starts like a horror story. Lovers murdered in the hills of Florence. 8 double homicides over 17 years. Each one methodical, each one ritualistic. The Italian countryside becomes haunted, not by ghosts, but by something worse, a human being. They called him Il Mostro di Firenze, the Monster of Florence, a serial killer who stalked young couples parked in cars, turned intimacy into execution, and vanished into legend. But this isn't fiction. It's real. And what makes it darker than any crime novel is how it devours the people trying to uncover it. Journalist Mario Spizzi spent decades chasing the monster. Then came Douglas Preston, an American thriller writer living in Tuscany, who joined the hunt. Together they peel back the case, only to realize the true horror isn't just the killer, it's the investigation itself. As bodies pile up, the Italian authorities lose their grip on reason. Innocent men are accused. Evidence is twisted to fit theories. Conspiracies spiral out of control. Satanic cults, ritual murders, Masonic cabals. The line between truth and hysteria dissolves. The deeper Spizzi and Preston dig, the more dangerous it becomes. Soon, they aren't just investigating the case. They're part of it. Spezzi is arrested. Preston is threatened and forced to leave Italy. And the monster, never caught, never named, still out there, or maybe buried under decades of lies, bureaucracy, and paranoia. The Monster of Florence is more than a true crime story. It's a portrait of obsession, how fear can infect a society, how institutions can become the monsters they claim to fight. Every page drips with dread because you're not just watching evil being committed. You're watching it justified. The question isn't who is the monster, it's what made him possible. The police, the press, the panic, all feeding on tragedy until the case itself becomes a living thing, a myth that refuses to die. The Passage. It begins with an experiment, a cure for death, a serum meant to save humanity, tested on death row inmates and one abandoned little girl named Amy. But in trying to erase mortality, humanity erases itself. When the virus breaks loose, the world doesn't end with explosions or war. It ends with silence, Cities empty overnight. The infected, luminous, monstrous, almost godlike, sweep through everything. They're not just vampires. They're the next stage, humanity's final draft. A century later, the story restarts. The survivors live behind walls lit by failing floodlights, clinging to one last illusion of safety. Generations have passed, but Amy still walks the earth, untouched by time, changed by the virus but not consumed by it. The child humanity created to control the darkness has become the only thing keeping it alive. What makes The Passage the darkest book isn't the creatures, it's how much they mirror us. These virals aren't mindless. They remember fragments of who they were. Dreams, families, regret. The infection doesn't erase humanity, it traps it inside. Every scream, every kill, carries the echo of who they used to be. Cronin's novel drags you through centuries of decay, from bunkers and prisons to forests where whole cities have turned to dust. It's an apocalypse told like a myth. You feel history collapsing and rebuilding, like civilization is just a fever that keeps coming back. And yet, in all this ruin, The Passage finds something rare: faith. Not in religion, but in survival. In small acts of compassion that mean nothing on a cosmic scale, but everything to the people who keep doing them anyway. Amy becomes a symbol, not of hope, but of endurance. A ghost of human kindness that refuses to die. The virus isn't the villain. It's a mirror showing what humanity always was. Brilliant, cruel, hungry for eternity. We wanted to become gods. Instead, we created angels of death, glowing in the dark, whispering our name. The Passage isn't about the end of the world. It's about what keeps walking afterward. A world haunted by the things we made and the things we couldn't stop becoming. The Hellbound Heart. Desire. That's where it begins. Not love, not lust, but hunger. The kind that doesn't end when you get what you want, because it isn't about wanting. It's about wanting more. Frank Cotton is a man who's bored with pleasure. He's tasted everything the world can offer, and it's not enough. So when he hears rumors of a puzzle box, a small, intricate cube said to open the gates to ultimate sensation, he finds it, he solves it, and the world changes. But not how he imagined. Because on the other side of pleasure lies pain. The Cenobites arrive, beings of cold beauty and mutilated grace. They promise experiences beyond human comprehension. They keep that promise. Hooks, chains, and endless ecstasy twisted into agony. Frank is torn apart, body and soul, in a place where suffering is the art form. Yet that's not the end. When Frank's brother moves into the same house, his blood seeps through the floorboards and resurrects Frank, skinless, hiding, hungry again. His former lover, Julia, finds him, and what follows is love in its most monstrous form. She kills for him, luring men into the house so Frank can feed, rebuild, become whole again. Love turned into murder. Desire turned into decay. Clive Barker's The Hellbound Heart isn't just horror. It's philosophy with teeth. It asks what happens when the search for pleasure becomes a religion, when humanity crosses the line between indulgence and oblivion. The Cenobites aren't villains. They're priests of sensation. They don't punish, they serve. They believe pain and pleasure are the same thing, just different notes in the same eternal scream. And Frank, in his greed, summoned them willingly. By the time the puzzle box closes again, everyone is damned. Julia, Frank, even those who touch the edges of their madness. The box is patient. It waits for the next set of hands, the next whisper of temptation. The Hellbound Heart is about the cost of curiosity and the horror of getting exactly what you asked for. Because paradise and hell might just be the same place, depending on how much pain you can stand. The ones who walk away from Omelas. The ones who walk away from Omelas feels like a fairy tale, a radiant city, endless festivals, children laughing, bells ringing. the kind of utopia philosophers dream about and politicians promise. But Ursula K. Le Guin doesn't write fairy tales. She writes traps, because underneath Omelas' perfection lies a secret, one so horrifying it sustains the entire city. In a dark, windowless basement, a single child is locked away, starving, beaten, forgotten, and every citizen knows it. Their happiness, their music, their peace, all depend on that child's suffering. No one is allowed to help, because if the child is freed, Omelas collapses, its joy vanishes, its light dies, and so the people learn to look away. They rationalize, they whisper, it's necessary. They tell themselves that one life is a small price to pay for thousands of smiles. This is the quiet horror of Le Guin's story. Not the pain of the child, but the acceptance of the adults. The way evil thrives when it's neatly packaged as moral arithmetic. Omelas is not a city of monsters. It's a city of good people who made peace with injustice because it benefited them. Some see the truth and refuse to stay. They walk away. No one knows where they go, only that they leave behind paradise, stepping into uncertainty rather than living off another's misery. Le Guin never explains who's right. She doesn't offer comfort or closure. Instead, she leaves readers staring into the mirror, asking the same question. How much suffering are we willing to ignore for our own comfort? That's what makes The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas one of the darkest stories ever written, because it's not about monsters, it's about us. American Gods. It begins on the side of a highway. A man named Shadow Moon walks out of prison into a world that doesn't feel real anymore. His wife is dead. His future is gone. And then he meets a stranger who calls himself Mr. Wednesday. Charming, mysterious, and far too old to be entirely human. From that moment, American Gods stops being a road trip and turns into a funeral procession for belief itself. Wednesday is Odin, the All-Father, the Norse god of war and wisdom. But this is modern America, where faith has new idols, credit cards, cell phones, media, and algorithms. The old gods, brought here by immigrants centuries ago, are starving, forgotten, fading. They still exist, but in fragments. Anubis runs a funeral home. Chernobog kills cattle with a hammer. Bilquis, the goddess of love, devours men through seduction. Literally, their power depends on belief, and belief is dying. The new gods, of technology, of globalization, of screens, are taking over. What follows is a war that isn't about heaven or hell. It's about attention. Gaiman's world runs on worship, and worship runs on memory. The more we forget our myths, the smaller the gods become, until they're just ghosts haunting motels and backroads. Shadow becomes their witness, their sacrifice, a man caught between two collapsing pantheons. As he travels with Wednesday, he starts to see the world beneath the world, a hidden America built on forgotten faiths and ancient deals. Every diner, every billboard, every small town hides something sacred, rotting in plain sight. But American Gods isn't just fantasy. It's a story about cultural decay, how nations built on belief slowly lose their soul. About how consumerism replaced religion, and screens became the new temples. The horror isn't that gods walk among us. It's that we created new ones without realizing it. The war between old and new gods feels meaningless. Both sides are desperate for the same thing: devotion, attention, existence. Shadow realizes the real enemy isn't one god or another. It's the human hunger that keeps creating them. Perfect Victim. Perfect Victim tells the true story of Colleen Stan, a young woman kidnapped while hitchhiking in 1977. Her captors, Cameron and Janice Hooker, didn't just imprison her. They built a coffin-shaped box and kept her locked inside it under their bed for 7 years. 7 years. By day, Colleen was their servant. By night, their captive. Every rule, every movement, every word was dictated by fear. Cameron convinced her that an all-powerful organization, the company, was watching her, ready to torture or kill her family if she disobeyed. He didn't just build a prison. He built a religion of obedience. That's what makes Perfect Victim so terrifying. It isn't just physical abuse. It's psychological engineering. The book meticulously chronicles how a person can be broken down, reshaped, and taught to worship their abuser. Colleen eventually stopped trying to escape. She went to church, she visited her family, and then she returned, voluntarily, because she believed there was nowhere safer than the box. Maguire and Norton don't sensationalize it. They document it. Every manipulation, every lie, every way that captivity can twist the mind until freedom feels like betrayal. The story becomes a study in control, not through violence, but through belief. Cameron Hooker wanted to build a slave. Instead, he built a mirror reflecting humanity's darkest capacity, the ability to normalize evil. And Janice, his wife, stands as a second kind of monster, one molded by fear, who participates in cruelty to avoid becoming its target. When Colleen finally escapes, the horror doesn't end. She walks into a world that can't comprehend what she's endured. The court calls her the perfect victim, obedient, polite, conditioned. But the real message of the book is the opposite. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. There's only survival. You realize the scariest part isn't what happened in that box. It's how easily it could happen anywhere, to anyone, given enough fear, faith, and silence. Brotherhoods. When people talk about organized crime, they think of the mafia, cigars, suits, and loyalty codes. But Brotherhoods by Guy Lawson rips open a far colder reality. The criminal web hiding behind badges. Set in Australia's underworld, Brotherhoods exposes a terrifying paradox. What happens when those meant to uphold the law become its predators? Lawson dives deep into the world of corrupt police gangs, where loyalty to the uniform is replaced by loyalty to profit. Detectives who once swore to protect the innocent end up protecting drug lords, stealing evidence, and even ordering hits. The book reads like a thriller, but every event is real. Lawson doesn't just describe crime, he dissects systems. He shows how corruption doesn't need villains in masks. It needs routine, paperwork, silence, a network of officers who cover for each other, trade favors, and convince themselves they're doing what's necessary. That's what makes Brotherhood so disturbing. It's not about rebellion, it's about comfort. Evil hiding inside bureaucracy. Officers planting drugs, manipulating investigations, and living double lives as both cops and criminals. And when one of their own tries to blow the whistle, the Brotherhood closes ranks. They don't silence him with bullets. They erase his credibility. They make sure truth dies quietly. Lawson's investigative journalism captures a world where morality becomes elastic, stretched thin until it snaps. The book doesn't ask whether power corrupts. It asks how long a man can wear the badge before corruption starts to feel like duty. Each chapter peels back another layer of hypocrisy, revealing how deeply intertwined the justice system and the criminal world can become when no one's watching. There's no clear hero, only survivors. And that's the brilliance of Lawson's writing. It doesn't glamorize crime or glorify betrayal. It presents it clinically, forcing readers to question how much of their safety is built on illusion. Lawson leaves you with one lingering question. If justice itself can be bought, what's left to believe in? Catch every episode in the playlist.